Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very pleased to welcome you to this new webinar on Devsecops. Let me introduce myself. I'm Amaury Leroux, Marketing Coordinator at R&S Cybersecurity, and I'm on stage with Frédéric Lebars, Head of Research and Development, and Edouard Viau, Head of Product at R&S Cybersecurity. Before we start, I want to share with you some technical details. This webinar is being recorded, and you will receive in a few hours the link to access it as many times as you wish. Please feel free to ask any questions you may have during the webinar, and we will answer them at the end of the session. It remains for me to wish you an excellent webinar, and Edouard and Frédéric, the stage is yours. I'll let you present yourselves and start this session.
Hello everyone, so I'm Edouard Viau, the Head of Product for the Web Application Firewall product in R&S Cybersecurity.
Hello, I'm Frédéric Lebars. I'm Head of R&D and Technical Support Teams for the Application Security products at R&S.
Okay, so we will begin this webinar. So the first part will be about the introduction. So we will tell you our current discussion with some customers and prospects about next generation application protection, Devsecops organization, cloud deployment, and so on and so forth. And then Trusted Application Factory, so the products that we co-created with these customers and prospects. What is the underlying concept, architecture? We will do some live demonstration and then show what parts of Trusted Application Factory take in our own portfolio with the other products that we are developing, and then speak about the Devsecops community that we just created. So let me introduce. So first of all, we speak a lot with customers and prospects about digital transformation, about cloud deployment, Devsecops organization, and so on. But all these ideas are made in order to serve one purpose, which is the innovation and the competitiveness. So the aims of the customers are to reduce the innovation cycle, to test some ideas on the market, then find a market fit, or to fail quickly and then to adapt themselves. But which is really important nowadays is to be able to release one software quickly, but with security integrated in it, and to do not put one innovation per year, for example, but one new version per week or per month. So it's really important to find a way to reduce the cycle, and one way to do so is to automate everything. We'll speak about it. One other way is to build a scalable business. It's really important for people to be able to test an idea without putting too much money on the table and too much effort as well. So a scalable business is on the business model, but also on the underlying architecture. So for example, being able to have few infrastructure when I have few customers, but being able to scale when more customers will buy the product. And then break the silos. So a lot of organizations are willing to enter into Devsecops organization, to stop to create a product in one department, test it in one other, and to put it in production in a third one. But we want to put all these competencies into a single team in order to do things faster. So one way to do so, like I said, is to automate everything. One way to automate is to build some CI/CD pipeline. So CI stands for continuous integration and CD for continuous deployment. So the idea is each time a new source code is being sent, we build a new version of this software, we test it. If it's okay, if all the tests are okay, we can also deploy it automatically. And so some of these tests are functional tests, for example, but it's really important to integrate in the build of the application the security. So to integrate security solution directly in the CI/CD pipeline. On the trends, so we made some surveys with our customers in order to know what are their next generation application, what technologies they are leveraging. So a lot of our customers are doing containers. So on a part of their application, I mean, they are investigating on it for their new application, but they have also a legacy. But what we see is that we have two worlds, the legacy application and the next generation application. That could be developed in microservices using Docker, deployed with Kubernetes orchestrator, with Terraform in order to do infrastructure as code, Ansible to configure this application. So yeah, we are investing more and more in the technologies in order to automate. One of the things really important in our interviews with customers, we have one definition of DevSecOps per customers. They are all in a transition. Some of them will want to do some things, some other with another organization. So, which is really important is to be able to speak to different persona and to create a product that will link this persona around the security, so that a team could do a part of the security, another persona could have another task in the security to do, but at the end, we need to be able to be the product of a production team, a DevSecOps team, and a central cybersecurity team. Another interesting discussion is the vulnerability assessment. So currently in their CI/CD pipeline, the customers have integrated or will integrate SAST and DAST solution. We see them really often in the market. So the aims of SAST is to directly analyze the source code with a white box approach and with this semantic of the source code, being able to detect some flaws in it. The DAST will test when the software has been built, for example. So both in the pre-production and the production environment, test some patterns, then some version of the software in order to know if a vulnerability could occur. And the last one is SCA. So the main idea behind SCA is to tell you that only 10% of the source code is really written by your developers, but you will have a lot of dependencies. And it's really difficult to know all the dependencies that I have to protect, which one are outdated, and so on. So it's really important to take into account the life cycle of your libraries. And then, so we will speak about Trusted Application Factory and what we do in all these trends and pain points that the customers currently have. So in a nutshell, Trusted Application Factory, we put our security engines because we are doing web application firewall since more than 20 years with some strong security engines. And we took these security engines, we put them in a container without the network handling, without some configuration and so on. And we put only which is important in the container. All of the other functionality are deported in a SaaS console in order to be able to be used, but not close to the application. So we put these security engines in a container, which is really scalable. We had a strong focus on false positive reduction. We'll speak about it in order to, in a pre-production environment, be able to detect some false positive before the run phase, because in a classical model with a WAF, generally speaking, we put in production, we put the WAF in warning mode during 1 week, 2 weeks, and it's not really compatible with the new way to fabric application. So yeah, we will dig into the details of it. And then focusing on DevSecOps, they could provide configuration file, code in order to create the security policy that we will directly enforce with our container and security engines. So there are 2 pillars inside this product. The first one is I have next generation application as a customers, and I want to protect them. So what we call a next generation application is, for example, an application leveraging containers, developed as microservices with different APIs, to protect, and yeah, with the scalability in mind. The second pillar is designed for DevSecOps. So you can really build your security in the build process, write some configuration files and so on, integrate into the CI/CD pipeline with the other security products already integrated, and be able to correct vulnerabilities more quickly by virtual patching and custom rules, for example. So yeah, some of the customers that are not mature enough for the moment for DevSecOps will want Trusted Application Factory for the left part, so adapted to next generation application, and some of them for the both part, so also for the DevSecOps focus. So I put an example. So here, a developer produced some code, will put it inside a repository, so a Git repository in this example. And when we have a new source code, automatically the CI/CD pipeline will execute. So when it will execute, it will perform some tests, both security tests, but also tests on the software himself, functional tests, in order to detect that if everything is working well with this new source code. So the first idea is to have Trusted Application Factory here in order to detect false positive automatically. You can pass some real traffic on your test in order to see if some false positive occurs. And then Trusted Application Factory will tell you, okay, I've detected this. I suggest this false positive management. And you can just, we will see it in the demonstration. You can just take it and put it in a file, and you validate that you want to solve this problem. But also, if you have DAST software, vulnerability assessment, you are being able here to understand what the generic security engines of Trusted Application Factory are being able to block proactively, and then what is the remaining risk that you need to address. And then you have also the product in the run phase. So really when you have deployed the product, so here we will enforce everything that we have created in the pre-production environment, but also some configuration files that the developers could do in order to give us security information, for example, an OpenAPI file to enforce it into our product. So we take as an input the OpenAPI file, and everything that has not been described by the developer, we will automatically block it. So it's the idea. We take all the configuration file, we transform them into security policy, and at the run phase, we are being able to enforce it. And you have 2 dimensions, so specific or generic. Here in this example, for example, I have a WordPress application. I could have, for example, a plugin that will be vulnerable to one particular flow. So in this case, for example, a DevSecOps team could create a custom rule, deploy it directly in order to protect the WordPress application. But for example, if I have several WordPress applications in my company and a huge vulnerability occurs to every application. So here, not on a particular plugin, but in WordPress. I could also do it centrally in order to provide this virtual patch to every application in my company directly. Here I put an example of our security, generic security engines. So not talking about what the developer can do particularly, but when you plug Trusted Application Factory, like I said, you have different security engines. Here we put an example of one vulnerability, which is common injection. So common injection is the top one in the top 10 WASP of different flow. And the aims of it is you take an input from the user, you do not sanitize this inputs, and then, for example, you execute a system command within your code. Here in the example, it's PHP code. I put the input of the user, and then maybe it could do a malicious thing. So in this use case, it is a whois page. So an whois page is meant to know who is behind the domain name. So if the user tell me, I want to know who is behind google.fr, I will execute a command saying whois and space, and then the user input. So with the correct input, google.fr. As an answer, I have a real answer, so I can know who is behind this domain name. Then with a malicious one, in fact, you can use what we call escaping characters in order to execute, for example, 2 commands in a row. So here we put an escaping character, one Linux command, which is just to list a directory, so nothing particularly malicious. But you can see that saying google.fr and then another command, I am able to execute arbitrary commands on the real backend, and then to install backdoor, S3 database, and so on. So in this example, we will both detect that people are leveraging escaping characters. We will detect that ls is a Unix command, but we can also detect the Windows command. And by correlating these two information, we will be able to detect that something malicious is occurring. So it was just an example. We are looking at all the top 10 OWASP. We have different security engines and so on. But just for you to remind that after this, we will speak about particular rules that you can do or false positive. But just by installing the product and applying a first security policy, you have all these capabilities. And like I said, so you have different persona in your organization, and you could imagine some different way to do it. You could, for example, have a transversal security team that will produce a general security file that will be applied to all the application. So it's the generic approach, and then ask some specific things to the Devsecops. So one good example is the OpenAPI file format, which is specific to an API. So I will import it in order to enforce it, but also some false positive, for example, or some whitelist of APIs, a lot of things, or custom rules to protect the application. And for people that have classical application and next generation application, so with our current product web application firewall, we are already being able to have security policies in the form of workflow, so graphical workflow that you configure. We produce some log, and the good news is, since it's leveraging the same technology, you can put Trusted Application Factory on your next-gen application, have the web application firewall on your classical application, and then it will be the same format of logs, so you will be able to correlate them. It's the same kind of security policies, so you can reuse part of the works that you have done here with Trusted Application Factory, and to add your custom rules on top of it. And then the user will be both protected by a WAF in the case Web Application Firewall, and in the other case Trusted Application Factory. So here we show you a new era. In the past, we made what we call infrastructure as code. So the aim was to automatically deploy our products, for example, with Terraform scripts. So the idea is to describe what I want to create. For example, one management console of my web application firewall, two running instances in order to protect the traffic with auto scaling, for example. Then once I'm able to automate the infrastructure, I have the configuration part. So once I have my new running machine, I will deploy everything. So when I say everything, it's the application to be protected, the policies, or the configuration needed to do so. So I will do it, for example, with Ansible script. So, and here today, the new era is security as code. So the aim is to, like the other, to describe in files what we do not want anymore to do manually with human. So the false positive management, some part of the security, the context of the applications that I want to protect in order to do a better job, and so on and so forth. And yeah, it's really the aims of the product, be able to describe all of this. Trusted Application Factory, so could be deployed in Kubernetes cluster, but we are agnostic, so it's not only about Kubernetes, but it's a good example because it's mostly used by our customers for their next generation application. So we can deploy it inline or as a sidecar container, so close to the application. So here the idea is not to have a big WAF gateway before the cluster, but to be inside the cluster with smaller WAF in a container that will scale with the application. So just to sum up a little bit what I've said, so in the innovation, we will focus on the false positive in order to reduce the number of false positives. The context description approach is a good way. You say, okay, this application is developed with PHP language, leveraging NoSQL database, for example, and then we will activate or not some security engines. And it will be really tailored to the real application behind. Protect against 0 days because we have a really generic approach in our engines. So we don't do, for example, patterns for each vulnerability, but we do generic patterns that allow us to block 0 days attack and to not be specific, but generic. And then for the APIs, for example, like I said, we are being able to enforce Open API. So it's really more easy for developers to have something working as a security for it. And it will also reduce the number of false positives that you have to manage. And so it was for the innovation part, and then this scalability. So like I said, we are in a container deployed close to the application. And you will see in the demos from Frederick, we are being able to integrate it into a CI/CD pipeline, for example, or to integrate the deployment into some script. And one real example, if I have one application with 100 dependencies, for example, these dependencies have some vulnerabilities. With custom rules, your developers will be able to write some rules in order to protect the application. And for example, they could do correct 1 of 2 high severity attack, 6 out of 10 for medium, and 5 out of 8 for low severity, because not all the vulnerabilities are web-based or HTTP-based, for example, but part of them you will protect them with the WAF. And the good news is that with the virtual patch approach, you can be more quickly, but you will correct the application behind. But the idea is to first provide a virtual patch and then take some time to do not do what we call panic patching. So, and to stop everything into your R&D department in order to do not have any risk anymore and so on. So it's really a way to be quick and then to have time to do these things in a good way. So like I said, the WAF at the middle is a technology for several products. The first one is the Web Application Firewall. So both in virtual machines and physical appliances, we are deployed into the cloud marketplaces, so Amazon, Microsoft, Google. So you can directly instantiate our product from this platform. Then we have Cloud Protector, so it's the SaaS version of our web application. So the MCs you redirect your traffic from your DNS to our infrastructure, and we host the web application firewall. We scale them, we update the software ourselves, and the new one that we are demonstrating in is Trusted Application Factory. So made for next generation application, think also for Devsecops organization. So it was for the slide presentation, and then Frederick will do some demonstrations.
Thank you, Edouard, for this complete presentation of the product and the Devsecops challenges. I take the mouse now. Just a short reminder, do not hesitate to ask questions on the chat. We will answer to them just after the demonstration and the end of the presentation. So now I will show the product, Trusted Application Factory. First, about continuous integration and deployment pipelines. For that, I will use a small project, very simple API with 2 endpoints, article and rating. And we will see inside this project how to embed the security, how the security configuration, could be part of the application source code. So let's start. For this demonstration, I will use a project within Gitlab Ci. Of course, we can do the same in other tools like Jenkins, for instance. Start the demonstration. So here we have a classical GitLab project with the application source code here, the different layers, so controllers, models, routes. We also have some automatic testing inside to validate the behavior of the different endpoints. So we send some requests and check the response of the request. And what we'll see that now we also have the security definition inside the application source code. So I'm doing a short pause here. We have 2 files. The first one is to describe the security policy inside. We use for that YAML files with the same format as, for instance, Docker Compose or Kubernetes files. And in this file, we can define, of course, information about the endpoint to protect the API, and what we call here the workflow params is some information about the application that we allow Trusted Application Factory security service to automatically adapt the security definition. So to get a very relevant security for my application. So in this example, we set different parameters, application type, so here REST API, the data format, JSON, and the persistent layer we are using, here SQL database, the operating system, and the languages of the application. With all this information, we are able to enable or disable security engines, specific patterns. So we keep only security policy relevant for the API. So increasing the security and reducing false positive. And if we continue, we will see the second files. Here is exceptions definition to handle false positive, for instance. And now let's see the Gitlab Ci file. So it's a standard file from Gitlab Ci to describe the continuous integration and deployment pipeline. In this example, we have two steps, the build one and the test one. In the test step, we can see different information. So we are able to reference the security service here and to run some scripts to configure, with the help of the two files we've seen, the security in this service. Then in the test part, we launch the test and we get the result at the end. And now let's see in the GitLab project, the pipeline's execution. So here we can see the result of different execution of the pipeline with the status of each step, the build one and the test one. And now let's take the role of a developer. I implement a new endpoint, here a comment in my API. So I write the necessary code files to manage this endpoint. And as I'm a good developer, I also add some tests to validate that this new endpoint has a good behavior. So I add a new test files for comment endpoints with some requests to check. Now my job is done for this new endpoint. So I will simply commit the endpoint and the test in Git and push it to the server. Let's do it. So committing the modifications and pushing to the server. So it's trigger a new pipeline. We will go back to the GitLab project to see the execution of these pipelines. It's currently running. We have the build step and the test will be launched just after. So tests are running. So my tests are executing and it's validating the behavior of the API with the security service deployed in front of this API. Oh, I got an error, so I will go in the details of the tests to see what is happening. So we have the details here in GitLab of the test. And if we look at the last test here, we see that we got here a blocked status instead of OK status for the request. At the end of the file, we can see some information about this blocked request with an hint to manage it. So if to me it's false positive, I'm able to add a new exception in the application source code to manage this false positive. So I simply copy information in my exception file. I can modify information in this exception. So for instance, renaming it to explain why I consider that is false positive, and I can add an exception. And I can also modify the exception itself. So here I have a dynamic part in my URL. So I modify it to handle this dynamic part. Now that's done, I've updated my security configuration, and to deploy it, I do exactly the same that as a source code. So I commit this file in Git and push it to the server. It will launch a new pipeline, and we should validate that with this new exception, yeah, that's now okay for the test. So we are really able to run all automatic tests with the WAF and the security service deployed to validate that the behavior is fine, and we will get exactly the same behavior in production with no difference. So now, yeah, let's see how to deploy this in production. Go from the CI part to the CD part. For that, I will use another project, still a very simple API, but this time deployed on a Kubernetes cluster. So of course, I got some configuration file for the Kubernetes deployment. We can just have a look to these files. So for the API itself, here, so information about the API service to deploy, and for the security service. So it's the same behavior that's for the API. And if we look at the pipeline description, we now have a deploy stage. This stage will effectively deploy the API and security service in the production. So we got several lines in the script. First one are to instantiate a GCP cluster. So in our case, we use GCP for the Kubernetes. And then we have some information to build the API service, to deploy it, and finally to deploy the security service. Here we can see the URL of the production. So let's go to this production server. The API considers that it's not it's a legitimate request, and I want to add a false positive. The behavior for a developer is to create a new merge request, so like a branch, add a new test to reproduce the behavior from the production, so to trigger this false positive. So here I run the test and it failed because we reproduce the behavior from production, so it's blocked, and I want it to not be blocked. I got the hint for the exception management, and like in the continuous integration demonstration, we add it to the exception files. So here I do it directly in Git. I commit my changes in my branch, so it will trigger the pipeline in the branch that will test the behavior of this version. Let's see how it works. So it's currently building the API and it will test it just after. So it's test. Now I know that in my branch, this false positive is correctly managed. If I want to deploy it in production, I simply have to merge this modification in the master branch of my project. And it triggers a new pipeline, this time with a final step that is a deployment in production. So if all is okay, like here in this case, my modification is now in production. Let's have a test. So I go back to the production and try again the same request. And now it's okay. So I have simply managed my false positive using the Devsecops principle. So what we can see here is all information about security definition, exception management is now directly embedded in the application. And Devsecops teams are autonomous to handle it and to deploy it in production, so to fix some issues regarding security in production without the assistance of any external people. So we have just seen that with the product, the security now is directly in the source code of the application. So it means a lot of benefits, like the security definition is always in line, up to date regarding the application source code. If we do some rollbacks and hotfixes, it will be the security level will be still in line with the application. And we can also use it to do some differences between versions, so to analyze the difference also in terms of security between two versions. And we also see that Trusted Application Factory does not require new knowledge regarding languages, concept. We reuse exactly the same that for other DevOps tools, like we've seen same format as a Docker Compose, for instance. And we can, with this product, directly be integrated with common Devsecops tools like we've just seen in the demonstration, Gitlab Ci, but also Jenkins. The WAF is delivered as a Docker container, able to be deployed in Kubernetes, for instance, or Openshift. And we are, by the way, able to automate everything from the development, the code commit, to the deployment in production. So for existing DevOps teams, they can directly use this product in their process without having to modify this process or to adapt this process. And they can use it without any additional knowledge or skills required. So the learning curve for this product can be very fast. And using these tools, DevSecOps teams are really able to keep the agility of their team, but this time with the security directly embedded in the process, and to be autonomous for all operations, including security. Now let's see another concept that we have called workflow as code. Edouard present us the importance to facilitate collaboration between different teams and to integrate all the persona of the company in this process. And this new concept, workflow as code, is really designed for that. Usually, for web application firewall, IT or security teams are using graphical definition with our product workflow, famous workflow, to really describe the security. So it's very useful, very visual to do it, but the way DevSecOps teams are working are quite different, because DevOps prefer to use a source code text file to do it. So that's why we created the workflow as code. It's a way to embed and to describe this security definition, this workflow, directly in the code of the application using some piece of code. And what Trusted Application Factory is providing, it's a way, it's a tooling to go from one definition to the other one. So both definitions here have the same behavior. So it's exactly the same security policy that is used. It's just different way to describe it. And Trusted Application Factory enables to go from one format to the other one very easily. So using this, security teams, transversal security teams, are able to share some security packages or security definition with their DevSecOps teams. So they are really able to work together and to share information regarding security. That's all for this demonstration. I give you back the end, and the mouse.
Thank you. So Trusted Application Factory, what we have released in January was the freemium deployment. So the idea is we have a freemium that you can test easily in your CI/CD pipeline and so on, to test it on your PC in order to see how you deploy the application and so on. And then when you put the solution in production, then you begin to pay. Some standard security, so we put some pre-built security policies in order to protect your applications with the context description capabilities. So with the configuration file, being able to describe my application to have a tailored security policy for it. The micro-waf, so the concept of a container with our security engines. The ability to integrate into CI/CD pipeline. Like Frédéric has shown in the demonstration, the ability to do some exception, false positive management in configuration files, the monitoring of the containers, so that we could restart automatically a container where a problem would have occurred, and the ability to do workflow as code. What we are going to release is the custom security workflow, so the ability to import some workflow and to do not use only the standard one, I would say. Then the ability to have a SaaS licensing in order to pay as you go with our product and to pay for what you use. Then some improvement of our current customer feedback. In June, the first version of our SaaS GUI. So the idea is to have first the logs, some few dashboard, and to see what applications are protected. But at the end, we really want in this SaaS console to have every information you may need. So about what have been blocked, but also maybe some investigation information for the developers to know better their environment, to discover what is not protected, maybe what is not used in an API in order to remove it and so on. So useful information. And then in October, so what we call API, Open API, sorry, annotation. So currently you are being able to import an Open API and to enforce it, so to block what is not meant to be exchanged with the API. But we want to go one step further. And one example is to do an annotation in order to say, for example, the endpoint /login, the answer, the output will be no more than 10 bytes because it will be just an OK, not OK with an ID. And so if I see 8 megabytes that go as an answer from this endpoint, I will block it because maybe it will be a database filtration and so on. So we will add some intelligence in annotation so that we could enforce some more rules in order to do a better security. And advanced outgoing filtering is the same spirit. So the idea is to do not only analyze the request, but as well the answer in order to see exfiltration of data or a real breach has been exploited by someone. So here is the idea about the roadmap and what we will do in the future to enhance this product. And the last information that I want to give you is that we created a Devsecops community. So the aim is really to exchange ideas about application security in general. So it could be about SaaS, about DAST, what are your strategies, what are your pain points, and the aim is to exchange with us, but also with your peers. So it's a real community, and every one passionate by this subject could really participate in order to share his knowledge, his ideas, or to ask some help. So you have here the URL of this Devsecops community, and we also post some blog articles, infographics, and so on. So don't hesitate to subscribe in order to exchange with us. So it is the end of this webinar. Maybe we can go through some questions.
Yeah, thank you, Edouard and Frédéric, for this presentation. We have first question, which is, could we deploy the solution outside of GitLab?
Yes,
okay.
I will answer to this question. For the demonstration, I use Gitlab Ci to deploy it within pipeline, CI/CD pipeline. We can do it with other tools, but we can also do it without any CI/CD pipeline. As you can see in the demonstration, we use some scripts, and we are also able to script the deployment of the microservice and to also configure it automatically using the same script. So completely outside of CI/CD pipeline.
Thank you, Frédéric. We have another question, which is, what should we do to protect an API?
Yeah. So, like we said, one example is a good example is the Open API, because the developers are used to produce this kind of file. So by just importing this file format, we could directly enforce it. We have also our blacklist engines in order to protect this API. But yeah, the main idea is to be able to do a lot of things with the product, but also to have an easy way to have a really good security level. And open API enforcement is a whitelisting technology approach, sorry. But yeah, whitelisting is really efficient with API because it's more easy to define for some machine-to-machine communication, what will we wait and be able to block everything else.
Yeah, and definition of the API is part of the implementation, and so very easy to use it.
Thank you. Can we automate the creation of the policy?
Yeah, so we more and more, so currently, for example, for the false positive management, you are being able to have some hints, like we have seen in the demonstration, and to manually validate it or to modify some of these things. But the idea is to more and more automate something. For example, context description, you are being able to today manually describe your application. One way in the roadmap could be to fingerprint in order to also put some hints that we could validate. So, like I said, the aims of the companies for innovation is to automate everything. So we are already focused on automation, and we will continue in the roadmap.
Maybe one point in addition. So today the tools is providing some hints, and maybe we can easily imagine to automate this part too. Something which is very important, we can see it in the roadmap, is that we want to create and to enhance this product with the help of our customer and with feedback from our customer. So if automation of one of part or integration with some last tools is very important for our customer, we will really focus on it and implement it. So that's a kind message to say you participate to the community, and please do not hesitate to test and this tool. It's provided as a freemium version to do some POC on that. So do not hesitate and give us your feedbacks. It will really help to have a very powerful tool for that.
Okay, thank you, Frederic. Last question we'll take, and then we'll conclude this webinar. What is the licensing model?
Yeah, so it's a subscription. You can, it's a pay-as-you-go model. So you have two different dimensions in the pricing: the number of applications and APIs that you want to protect, and also the number of requests for this application. So yeah, really the two dimensions. You could have, for example, few applications with a huge traffic, or a lot of small APIs with so much traffic. So it was important to integrate these two different dimensions in it. And so, yeah, you can have it as a pay-as-you-go model. So you will have some invoice about what you have spent in terms of number of application and traffic. And for organizations that are not ready for pay-as-you-go model, we have imagined a credit system where we could upsell, upfront sell you some credits, and to return the model so that you have some credits and you consume them.
Thank you, Edouard. Thank you, Frederic. It's up to me to conclude this session. One last reminder, you will receive the recording of this webinar in the next few hours. You will also receive the link to discover and to register to our community website, dedicated to Devsecops teams. Please feel free to contact us with any other questions you might have, or if you want to test the product. Thank you everyone for your participation. Thank you, Frederic. Thank you, Edouard, for the presentation, and see you soon for a future webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.